Covering. All right, so welcome to our July Tale Spinners. I have the great pleasure to introduce four wonderful tellers tonight: our featured teller, and then three of our community tellers. So our featured teller comes to us from, well, usually from Toronto. Tonight he's coming from the shores of Lake Erie, but Raymond Pierce. And so he is a native of St. John in New Brunswick. And he is the second oldest of nine children, where was able to hone his storytelling skills to be the family's resident babysitter. And he's continued on to the present day, telling his funny stories to audiences young and old. And his expanding repertoire includes personal stories about summers when his families lived in a chicken coop,
Yeah.
Christmas in 1950, a wildly funny Halloween prank, and his dad's new Christmas dentures. And I'm not sure how many of those we'll get to hear tonight, but he also offers, he also shares his stories weekly through a weekly email entitled Weekly Morning Smiles. And Raymond will post some information about that after his story so that you can sign up. I can personally endorse it. His stories definitely make my morning and my husband's mornings more cheerful. And he also has compiled a book of his own original stories. And copies are running out. So he will also have information on how to get a hold of your own copy of his collection of humorous stories. And now, with no further ado, I hand the floor over to Raymond Pierce.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you. So, so here is the fractured fairy tale version of Cinderella and the Handsome Prince. And as I mentioned earlier, I first memorized it in 1988. It took a month of work to get it down pat. And here it is. As some fairy tales begin, once upon a time in a foreign country, this story begins, "Once upon a wine in a corn fun tree, there were these beautiful girls. Unfortunately, two of them were sad bisters, and they lived with their muggly udder and our heroine, Dincerella. Well, one day this pransome hints, he had come to this corn fun tree, and he decided to throw a bancy fall for all the beautiful girls in the corn fun tree. Well, when the two sad bisters and their muggly udder heard about the bancy fall, why, they went out to the shopping center and bought, guess what? Why, new dancy fesses to wear to the bancy fall. Well, poor Dincerella. She didn't have a dancy fest to wear to the bancy fall. All she had were her riddy dags, and she cranked out and sighed. But fever near, who should drop by that night? Why, her Gary Fudbutter. You remember her? She's the one with the wagic wand. Well, her Gary Fudbutter weighed her wagic wand and transformed Dincerella's riddy dags into a magnificent mess with a stink mo. Now I'm going to repeat that word because I know you want to tell your friends the story tomorrow. So that's a magnificent mess with a stink mo. Translation: a magnificent dress with a mink stole. Oh. Well, her Gary Fodmother weighed her wagic on again and made her a big boat with X horses to pull it. Well, Dincerella was really thrilled about all this, but her Gary Fodmother warned her, beware of the moke of stridnight, because at the moke of stridnight, everything will return back to the way it was. Well, Dincerella was still really excited with her new magnificent mess with the stink mold that she climbed into that gig boat and she drove those horses down to the palace for the fancy fall, mind you. Well, that Pransome hints he had met Dincerella at the Dunt Fore because he had seen her coming through a wooden window, and he escorted her up the beps, up the palace beps, and into the fall boom. Well, they had a wonderful time. They danced and danced all night, but sure enough, at the moke of stridnight, the mock on the wall went wing wang, and Dincerella realized, I better get home in a hurry. So she ran out of the fall boom, and as she's running down the palace steps, you know what happened? Why, she slopped her dripper. Oh my God, she slopped her dripper on the start of the bep, and then she disappeared. Well, that Pransome hints he had come a running after Dincerella, and he found that dripper which had been slopped on the start of the bep, and he picked it up and saved it. Well, the next day, that Pransome hints he went throughout the whole corn fun tree, visiting every beautiful burl in the corn fun tree and trying that slop dripper on the foot of every one to see whose foot it fitted. Well, finally, he arrived at the home of Dincerella, and he went in and he tried that slop dripper on the foot of the first sad mister. And you know what? It fitn't it. No, it fitn't it. He tried it on the foot of the second sad mister. And of course, it fitn't at her either. And he even tried it on the foot of the Mugly Udder, and we certainly know it fitn't at her. Well, finally, at last, he did try it on the foot of Dincerella. And yes, it fit it. It really fit it. And we all know how that story ended. Why, they were mappily harried, and they lived lappily ever after. And that's the truth. And that's it. Thank you for listening.
That's it. Oh my goodness. Raymond, I don't know how you managed to learn that in just a month and to keep a straight face while you're doing it.
Actually, I've written I'm working on a second book, so I've written a story about how I learned, how I came to upon the story, and how I learned it. So so there'll be a story in my next book about the history of the Cinderella version that I tell. Thank you. Are you ready for something else, another one?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to take this is a winter story. So if you're hot in California, maybe this will help cool you a little bit mentally. This is Christmas 1950. I'm 6 years old. And um, it's the morning of Christmas Eve, and it's snowing heavily outside. And my brother Norman and I, he's 2 years older than me, we're outside playing across the street with some of our friends. And we were having fun in the snow and having little snowball fights and things like that. We're having a great morning out there. And eventually we start talking about decorating Christmas trees. And so they say that, well, we don't decorate our Christmas tree. We leave that for Santa Claus. We do that every year. Santa Claus decorates our Christmas tree. And we said, well, that can't be right. Our mom and dad, it takes them a long time on Christmas Eve to decorate our tree. And if Santa Claus has to stop and decorate your tree, he might be late getting to our house to bring our gifts. Well, a very heated argument ensued from that, and we didn't gain any ground. There was a stalemate. They were adamant that Santa Claus would decorate their tree, and we were adamant that your parents should decorate your tree. So we went home feeling defeated. But Christmas morning came, and yes, Santa Claus came. And Norm and I woke up our younger brothers, Glenn and Kenny, and took them out to show them the gifts that Santa Claus brought. And we turned on the tree lights. And Norm and I each got a straw cowboy hat. and I call them a pop gun. It was a tin gun with a spring-loaded thing, and there's a cork on the end of it and a string on the cork so you wouldn't lose it. And you would shoot, you pull the thing back to load it up, and it would shoot about 2 feet. So anyway, so we played with those all day. But then after we looked at our presents from Santa, we went to look to see what Santa put in our Christmas stockings. Well, in our Christmas stocking was really nice treats. There was an orange. We hardly ever saw oranges. So it was a nice orange and a tissue paper with nice red grapes. That was a big treat. And a small box of sun-made raisins and a barley toy. A barley toy is a hard candy made of barley sugar, and it's translucent. It's orange or yellow, whatever, depending on the flavor. And it's often shaped like an animal or a car or a boat, whatever things kids would like. And you could suck on that all day long, and it would take you all day to eat it all by just sucking on it. And you'd have very sticky fingers at the end of the day. And we found some other little knickknacks and to play with. And there was some chicken bone candy. That's a silky looking bar of candy, about an inch and a half long with chocolate in the middle. There was ribbon candy, a piece of ribbon candy. And anyway, so we were quite happy with that. Those were big treats. So anyway, so Norm and I, like I say, we spend our time playing with our pop guns, knocking over things that we wouldn't hurt in the house. And our little sister Mary, who had just learned to walk a few months before, was toddling around in her diaper with her new dolly, and she was happy with her new dolly, but she also wanted to play with our pop guns. And Mom said, "No, don't let Mary play with those pop guns." So we kept them away for. She kept begging us to play with them, but we didn't let her have them. And then later that evening, we were toying between playing snakes and ladders or pickup sticks. I forget which, but we're playing one of those games and distracted. And while we were distracted playing the game, little Mary put on one of our cowboy hats, and we had left our guns under the tree where Mom told us to leave them. Always put your toys back under the tree so visitors can see them. So we left them under the tree fully loaded. And little Mary waddled over there with our cowboy hat on and picked up both pistols and went to Mom's nice new glass ornaments. And at point blank range, she pulled the triggers and smashed two of Mom's beautiful glass ornaments. Well, we rushed over. When we got there, Mary was very happy with her aim because she was doing a little dance. Well, now followed a family council meeting. And Mary had a very good defense lawyer who was Mom. And Mom said, since it's time for a diaper change, the case is dismissed. So Raymond and Norman can clean up the mess. Thank you.
Oh, that's the end. Yeah.
Okay, here's the next one. Another Christmas. This is called My Dad's New Christmas Dentures. It's 1954 in St. John, New Brunswick. There's a heavy snow falling, making it a beautiful Christmas Eve. And Mom and Dad and us kids are going to the midnight mass at St. Peter's Redemptorist Church. And Dad always likes to sit in the last pew, but Mom and us sit up front. The church was packed. And Dad, when he goes to church, has the custom of lighting vigil lights for his special intentions. So he went up to the altar railing. St. Peter had a beautiful marble altar railing running the length of the sanctuary with little archways running all the way along it and 3 gates, one in the middle, 2 on the sides. And in the right-hand corner were the vigil lights behind the altar railing. And right next to that, because it's Christmas, is the Christmas crib with Mary and Joseph and the baby Jesus and all the animals, the camels, the shepherds and the wise men. So anyway, so Dad went up and he picked up one of those thin wax tapers, you know, the kind you light vigil lights with. And when you hold them upright, up like that, they burn down evenly. But when you hold it down like Dad was doing to light several vigil lights, a big flame eventually will develop, and soon it's coming up the taper towards your hand. And that's what happened to Dad. So he whipped it through the air many times, trying to put it out with no luck. And And then he'd start blowing on it, and he blew and he blew, and one big last breath, and oh my God, his dentures came out of his mouth, turned head over heels, and landed in the straw beside the baby Jesus. Now, what a predicament this is. I mean, it's almost time for midnight mass, and he's thinking fast. He says, I'm not going to climb over this altar railing in front of all these people. Half the people there know me. So, and what would the priests and brothers think if I climb over the altar railing to get and climb into the crib? Um, and if I leave them there till the end of mass, why people come up after mass to pray at the crib, and there my dentures will be in the straw smiling back at them. So I got to get them out. And just then the sanctuary bell went off, announcing the procession of 60 altar boys in their red satans and white surplices, and 6 priests in gold vestments. Everyone's carrying candles, and the choir started to sing "Oh Holy Night," and the procession is going to go all around the aisles of the church. And Dad has a quick notion. He sees the shepherd's crook, and he reaches over the altar railing, grabs the shepherd's crook, he sticks it under the altar railing, snares his dentures, and drags them through the straw close to the base of the altar railing so he can grab them. But oh, I forgot to say the most important thing. You know how he got the flame out? He threw it on the floor and stomped on it with his wet galoshes. Well, now he's got his dentures within reach, and he grabs them, wipes them quickly on his jacket to get the straw off, at least as much as he can, puts them in his mouth, and goes back to his pew. So everything turned out okay. Mind you, his mouth was a bit prickly during the mass, but after all, it was Christmas Eve. Thank you. Dinah, will you give me a heads up when I've got 2 minutes left?
Will do.
Okay. So the next one is called the Drug Bust. And this is a January sub-zero weather in St. John, New Brunswick, but it's a beautiful sunny day. And I'm out running errands. And when I'm done, I decide I'm going to get my favorite beverage at Tim Hortons, which is a double cream and double sugar medium-sized coffee. So I stop at Lansdowne Avenue and get my coffee, and I decide to drive up to Rockwood Park, which is right in the city, not far away, 5 minutes away, and I'll sit up there and watch people skate on Lily Lake. So I find a parking spot right beside the main pavilion, and from there I can see the whole lake and the hills surrounding it. When you're in Rockwood Park, you don't know you're near the city because you can't see any buildings, any residences, only what's inside the hills. So there were people skating on the lake, and I was enjoying my coffee and having a good time. And then a car in my rear view mirror, I could see a car pass slowly behind me. And what I saw sent shivers down my spine. Here in this car, in the brief image I saw, were 2 hard-looking men with black beards and chiseled features. They looked like they belonged to biker gangs. I said to myself, they must eat nails for breakfast. They look so mean. I wonder if they're drug dealers. What are they doing here in a recreational park? Making a drug drop-off, I thought. And they went down to the north end of the lake, and they parked. And they get out of their car, and they look suspiciously around to see if anybody was watching. And then they move slowly to the back of their car, to the trunk. And then each one, again, looking around to see if anybody was watching them, then each one reached inside his winter parka to his left pocket. I said, oh my God, gonna pull guns. And they both pulled something out, but it wasn't a gun at all. It was a red toque. So they put their toques on. And again, looking around suspiciously, they made their way to opening the trunk. And here I thought, well, they're going to take out the drugs now. No, they don't take out drugs as I imagined. They took out 2 plastic sliding mats, the kind that children use to go down hills full of snow. And they looked around suspiciously again and then made their way. They were right near the trail, which is beside the toboggan run for Rockwood Park. Great big steep toboggan run. So I could see them climb up the side of the toboggan run. They put their plastic mats on the ground. Now today in that weather, that ground is hard as a rock. That snow is packed hard and there's ice in it. And they put the mats down, they lay on their bellies and they push off. Now to say that that hill is bumpy is an understatement. They shot down that hill like lightning and they went bumpity bump, a bumper, ump, a bumper, ump, a bump, and right out onto the lake ice. Wow. They just lay there. They didn't budge for a second. For minutes, they just lay there, breathing heavily. And I start feeling sorry for them and regretting my rash judgment of their evil intentions. I was really remorseful. And after some time, they started to move. And one got up on one knee and the other, he got up on one knee. And then they staggered to stand up straight. They picked up their rubber mats and rolled them up. And they went back to their car, opened the trunk, threw the mats in the trunk, slammed it shut, and got into their car and then pulled away after having an attempt to relive their childhood days of sliding on a hill. Thank you. We got time for one more?
Got about 4 minutes left.
Just enough. This is called My Cousin's Wedding. These stories are in my book, by the way, and I also send them out by email. So this is, it's 1996, and it's the hottest summer day in St. John, New Brunswick. It's up in the high 90s. That's not typical of St. John. We're on the Bay of Fundy, where it's cool, but it's in the high 90s. My cousin Wayne and his wife Janie are getting married at St. Peter's Church, and after the wedding, I'm missing a part here. The bride is late, so I'm waiting at the top of the steps for the bride to arrive, and she finally pulls into the church parking lot, honking her horn to let everyone know she's on her way. She gets out of her car, slams the door, and bounds up 36 steps to the top, out of breath. So I escort her into the church. So after the wedding, the bridal party naturally will want to take pictures on the beautiful grounds of St. Peter's Church, beautiful grounds there. And I was chauffeuring my mother and some other family members in my dad's car. And mom was getting irritated waiting in the heat for them to take all their pictures. So she said, let's go to the hotel where it's air conditioned and we can sit and relax in an air conditioned room. I said, oh, good idea. So we all jumped into the car. We went to the Holiday Inn at Haymarket Square, parked the car, and mom led the way. From here on, we're following mom's lead. We're taking mom's lead. Everything that happens after this is mom's fault. So we follow mom into the lobby, and there you get right in front of us. Here's the big wedding banquet room all set up with the 3-tier cake on at the head table and all this big round tables and all kinds of nice things. And there's a desk inside the entrance where you can a guest book where you can sign, leave messages for the bride and groom. So we wrote a lot of silly, stupid stuff that only the bride and groom would understand or appreciate. So there were no name tags on the table. So mom said, let's sit here. So we sat here. Well, we sat down. There's wine and cheese and crackers and those crusty rolls that make all the mess when you break them up, and butter. And so we sat down. Mom said, I'm hungry. I'm gonna have some a bun and some cheese, and I think I'll even have some wine. So mom started digging in and pouring herself some wine. Well, we weren't going to let mom eat alone, so we joined in eating, pouring the wine for ourselves and having some cheese and crackers or buns and butter and whatever. And we're having a grand time there and patting ourselves on the back for being smart enough to get out of that awful heat and into an air-conditioned room. And we were sitting there chatting, and I picked up, those matchbooks they used to put on wedding tables with the bride and groom's name on them. Well, I picked up one of them, and I said, oh, look here, some printer's made a real big mistake. He's got the wrong names on the matchbook. And then it hit me. I said, Mom, we are in the wrong wedding reception room. Let's get the heck out of here fast. Well, we weren't going to waste the wine, so we stood up and drank down what was left of our wine, and someone said, what about what we wrote in the book? Oh, forget it. Let's get out of here. So we went out and Mom volunteered me to go to the reception desk and ask, where was the Como wedding? So they gave us directions, turn right down the hall, turn left, and it's right there. So we got down there, we sat at a table, sat there with our arms folded, not willing to risk touching anything on that table, and wondering about the silly messages we left for whoever Tom and Susan are. We don't know them, but all those funny messages are there for them to read. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Raymond. And I think if they could, Tom and Susan would thank you for the story that you gave them as well with all of your unexpected messages.
So, anyway, so I'm going to put my email address, right?
Yep.
It's ready to go. I'm just going to press button, and there it is. There's my email address in the chat box. And if anyone is interested in my complimentary weekly family-friendly humor, just email me so I have a way to respond to you. And that's all we have to do. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. And that was, yeah. So it was a joy having you. And now we'll move on to our community tellers. And so our first our first story from our group, from our swap, is from Renu, who will be sharing a folk tale.
I didn't know I was going first. Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, Dhammam Sharanam Gacchami, Sangam Sharanam Gacchami. The chanting was coming from a monastery high up on the mountain. It was a weather-beaten monastery, but it had stood its ground over the years. The master and his students were sitting outside and chanting. And as they were chanting, there was a cool breeze blowing. And with the breeze, the chant drifted down, down, down below to the village. And it touched the families and the dogs and the plants and the trees. Dogs that were barking stopped. Children who were crying stopped. It had a calming influence on everyone. High up, the master had finished. He opened his eyes and the students dispersed. They went about their morning duties. Some of them cleaned the monastery. Some of them went to cut firewood in the nearby forest. And some of them started to wash the dishes, while the others started cooking breakfast. A simple meal that all of them sat together and enjoyed. After the meal was over, they all gathered again in front of the monastery. The master sat at a slightly elevated level, and he started his lessons. Now, every day, this master had a habit of saying one sentence before he started the lesson. He would always say, whatever you think, whatever you say, whatever you do, remember, someone is watching. And the students always wondered, who was watching them? Was it God? Was it the master himself? Or was it one of the senior students watching them? They had no idea, though they had discussed it many, many times. They had no clue. So they went on with their daily lessons, their daily duties, and the days and the weeks and the months went by. And one morning, the master said, winter is fast approaching and all of us have to be prepared for it. And the students nodded. They had come from far and wide, and some of them are not really used to this kind of harsh living, but they still stayed on because the master was excellent in the way he taught. Now, one day there was a storm. It started early in the morning. Thunder crash, ta-da-da, dum-dum-dum. There was flashes of lightning across the sky. And all of a sudden, as though the sky itself had opened up, there was a huge deluge of rain. All the monks, the students, were shivering in a corner with fear and cold. It had become terribly, terribly cold as winter was had already approached. There's no sign of the master. And the students thought to themselves, what was happening? Why wasn't the master concerned about their safety? Storm raged on. The wind howled. And all of a sudden, the wind was so strong, 75% of the roof was blown away. And now all the rain was falling on the students. And they just sat there, they couldn't do a thing. It's only when the thin light started coming in, the storm stopped. The students sat there for some time. And then they got up and came out. Monastery was in ruins. That's when they noticed the master was walking towards them. And he had been watching them all this while. He knew exactly what was happening in their minds. He said to them, yes, monastery is in ruins. We don't have a roof over our heads. My students, I think all of you should go back home. What about you, master? Asked one of them. I'll stay here. This is my home. I don't have anywhere else to go. I'll manage. Don't worry about it. But master, we cannot let you stay here. We have to do something. Can we repair the monastery? Well, you know very well, to repair a monastery, we need money, and we have none. Surely there's some way, master. Surely there's some way to rebuild it. Well, we need money, right? So I want all of you to assemble here when it's night, when it's nice and dark. And I want each one of you to form a pair and go down the mountain, down to the village, and enter the houses of the people and steal whatever you can find, something that has value. We shall sell it in the market. And when we have enough money, we shall build the monastery. Students looked at each other. What? What was master saying? Was he a fake? All these days he said, whatever you think, whatever you say, whatever you do, someone is watching. What was he saying now? The master continued. Remember, come back here tonight. The students dispersed. They tried to do their work as usual, but much of the stuff was destroyed. That night, they all assembled, and they were in pairs. Master said, okay, time to go now. Start. And they started going. It was a treacherous mountain, and it would take hours to get down to the village. Slippery stones. So they had to really, really be careful. They had no torches to show them the light, show them the way. They started walking. Only one boy stood there without moving. Master said, what is wrong with you? You will not listen to your master's instructions? Tell me, Gombu, why haven't you moved? Master? Yes, Gombu. You always say, whatever you think, whatever you do, whatever you say, someone is watching? Yes, Gombu. Who is watching? Whatever I think, whatever I say, whatever I do, someone is watching, master. And that someone is me. I'm watching myself, master. And when I'm watching myself, how can I go down and steal? I'm sorry, master. I cannot steal. Master was quiet for a minute. Then he went forward, placed his hand gently on Gombu's shoulder and said, Gombu, you're the only one who understood the real meaning of my words. Now go down before it's too late and stop the others. And Gombu left. Master sat down again. Buddham Sharanam Gacchami. Dhammam Sharanam Gacchami. Sangam Sharanam Gacchami. Thank you.
Oh, Renu, thank you. What a beautiful story. Thank you. So our next teller will be the inimitable Bobby Kincaid with Li Chi, the Serpent Slayer.
Sooner than I thought. I've been telling stories from China, how dragons shaped China. And this is the sixth in a series. And the first three came from ancient China. And then the fourth one, Manu with the dragon who brought in on their New Year's. Well, here's my pet dragon. He's a young one. He's only got 3 toes, so he's not royal, and he's here, and he kind of lives with me. But as you can tell, I want to tell you what dragons look like if you don't know. They have the horns of a supposedly deer, but the rooster got the horns, so he has these kinds of horns. He has 2 knobs right here, so he can fly. He doesn't spit out fire. He spreads out this hot mist. He's got a head like a camel. It's usually longer when he gets older, and he's got eyes like a demon, and he has these ears. They're supposed to look like a ox ears. They'll grow bigger, and he has whiskers all over, which this young guy doesn't have. And his belly is soft like a frog's belly. He has scales all over like a fish, scalefish, and he's got claws like an eagle. And he has 4 legs, which this guy does, and he's very long, and he has paws like a tiger, so he can be very, very quiet. And the people of China just loved him. And I was interested in this in about 2005, and I saw this thing from the Guggenheim Museum where they had put the different dragons for the different times and their colors, which was very interesting. First, you have the yellow dragon, the earth dragon who did the farming, and then you have the water dragons who fly all over, and they help with the bamboo forest. Then you have the metal dragon that came in. They were dynasties, actually. And then the red ones are supposed to be the scholar dragons. And the last one is this black dragon. And he didn't last very long in China. He lived about 2,000 years ago, just at the beginning of our century. And he did incredible things. He's the guy that built the wall around China. And he made the characters from 50,000 to 500, and he made the wheel axis the same and all the wheels. And he literally opened up China to the Chinese, and so they could speak to each other. But he died very unexpectedly, and left China in this terrible state where uh, foreigners were coming in and they were wrecking their dragon dynasties and trying to take over. Well, Li Chi came out of this era. She is one of the heroes that helps China they had opened the Silk Road too, which didn't help. So she helps China get back to the dynasty, I mean, the dragons who control everything, and she helps the dynasties. So this is her story. Li Chi lived with her father and 5 other sisters. She was the youngest, and she would help in the rice fields. When she turned 12, she was very agile, very fast, and very strong because she danced in the fields with her father. They had all the martial arts, and all those dancers were used by the farmers to protect their fields. So she was quite strong, and they were having dinner, and it was the time, it was the time of the year when young maidens were given to this worm that lived up on the hill. And her 5 sisters had to go through that, but her father had grown enough rice that he could protect them. And this year, the same thing happened for Li Chi. He had grown enough rice in his fields that so when the sorcerer and the magistrate came, he could buy her freedom. Well, she had other ideas. She sat down at the table and she stood up and she bowed to her father. She bowed to her mother and her 5 sisters, and she said, Father, I am going to give myself to the worm. Well, she didn't get a chance to tell the rest of her plan because he slammed his hand down on the table and he said, no daughter of mine is going to do that. Well, she got very upset and she ran upstairs, and her sisters followed because they knew exactly how she felt. They had gone through it. She put on her old work clothes, her old boots. She wrapped her bedspread around herself and she left. She says, I'll be back. So she walked down the road to the sorcerer's house and she banged on the door, and the sorceress says, "What?" And she says, "Lychee, I've come to I've come to give myself to the worm." And the sorceress opened the door and she said, "What?" She says, "Yes, I come to give myself to the worm, and this is what I want. I want a metal bowl, I want some honey, I want some rice, I want a flintstone, and I want a dog, the snake dog in the fields." Well, the sorcerer says, "Come in, here, wait in this room." So she slammed the door and locked it. And Lychee waited, and while she waited, she did her dance, and she had the sword. She went into the rice shed before she left, and she got her father's sword. So she practiced with the sword. Well, pretty soon she could hear the magistrate talking to the sorceress, and the door was unlocked. And this dog, she knew it, and she came up and she petted him. And the magistrate said to her, "Here's this bowl." It had a crack in it. "Here's some honey. It was all dried up. Here's a flintstone. It was broken. And here's some rice. It was very old and moldy." And he said, "I think that'll do you. You probably won't be back." So she wrapped the things in her bedspread. And the sorceress said, "I'll come with you." Well, she walked really fast, so the sorceress couldn't come with her. And the dog and Lychee walked up this mountain. It was very steep. And the closer they got to the top, they could smell this awful smell, and they could hear this kind of growling. Finally, they reached the top. The smell was hideous, sour fat and rotting flesh. And they got up, and it was a temple with four pillars, and it really had a roof, and there was a cave. And this worm was actually in there. And she looked at the worm, and had a lot of teeth in its mouth. And he had big eyes. He didn't have thorns, and he had little tiny legs. And he was sleeping. So she got to work. The dog laid down by the entrance and watched the worm. And she put down her sticks that she collected on her way. And she put the little metal bowl down. She put the honey and the rice in. And with the flintstone, she struck it and started a fire. Well, this started bubbling and bubbling. And oh, it smelled so good. You couldn't smell the worm anymore. And all of a sudden, he crashed out, went for the bowl. Honey and rice burnt him, and he was rolling around, growling, and the dog jumped on him. And Lychee got her sword out, and she said, "One for my sister, two, three, four, five, and this is for myself." And she sliced off his head, and the worm just kind of rolled over. It was white and it was gooey, and it fell down. And the dog stayed there to protect it. And Lychee looked around. She saw all these bones, and she said, "What a waste. These girls could have fought that worm." And she puts them in a bag, her wraparound. She took them all in there, and her and the dog walked back down the hill. And she came back to their house, and she said, she knocked on the door, and everybody was really surprised to see her, especially the father, who had doubted her. And she says, "Father, we have to go to the city. I want to give back the bones to the parents." So they went and they donged the bell, and the farmers all came, and they gathered up the bones, and they thanked her very, very much. Well, some time went by, and the sorceress completely disappeared. And the landlord who owned all that land came in, and he gave Lychee's sisters all dowries, and he gave his father some jewels. And he turned to Lychee, and he said, "Would you be one of my wives?" And she said, "No, I'm just going to be a farmer and just marry a farmer. I'm quite satisfied." And that is the story of Lychee and how she helped chase these worms and serpents out of China so the dragon could rule again. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Bobby. It's always a joy to hear a story about a woman who knows her own mind and seeing what is possible.
Right.
So our next story is from Sarah Armstrong, and it is entitled "The Question."
Ah,
There was a young man who lived with his mother in a rice field, and they worked hard in that field from dark to dark, and they didn't seem to get ahead in any way. So the young man started thinking, and he thought and he thought, and he said, "I'm going to go see the Buddha and ask the Buddha why, when my mother and I work so hard, that we are still so very poor? Now his mother tried to discourage him. It was a long way and probably dangerous, but certainly very long way. But he would not be dissuaded. So she gave him her blessing and she packed for him what food she could, and off he went. He walked for quite a while and he came to see a house beside the road in an orchard and a man on the porch. And the man beckoned to him and said, "Come, come, tell me who you are and what you're about. Come and have some tea with me." So the young man greeted the older man. They went and had tea, and he told him the story. "I'm going to see the Buddha to ask why, when my mother and I work so hard all the time, we are still so very poor." "Good question," said the man. "Will you ask one for me? Will you ask the Buddha why, when my orchard grows so beautifully, every tree is in bloom and has fruit, except the one by my front door, even though I feed it and water it just like the others?" The young man agreed and went on his way. He walked for a long time and he came to another house where there was a woman sweeping the porch. "Come, come, come," she said. "Come and tell me who you are and what you're about. Have some tea with me." So he went inside and they sat at the table and he told her where he was going. "I'm going to see the Buddha to ask a question. Why, when my mother and I work so hard, we are still so very poor?" "Good question," she said. "Will you ask one for me? My daughter, who is healthy in every other way, doesn't speak. Will you ask the Buddha why she doesn't speak?" He agreed and off he went. He walked a long, long time. It was nearing a year and a day when he came to an abyss. He could see Buddha's house in the distance, but there was no way to cross this abyss. Discouraged, he sat down and tried to think about what to do when a dragon came up from the bottom of the abyss. It had a big pearl in its forehead and it said, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" So once again, the young man told his story. "I'm trying to get to the Buddha's house to ask him why, when my mother and I work so hard all the time, we are still so very poor." Well, the dragon said, "I can take you across the abyss if you'll ask a question for me." The young man agreed and he held on to the little wings on that dragon, and the dragon took him across the abyss and gently put him down. "Now, ask the Buddha why, when I have been working here doing my job for so long, that I'm not able to rise to heaven like my brothers and sisters." The young man agreed and walked towards the house of the Buddha. An assistant to the Buddha came down, greeted the young man, and asked him what he was about. The young man said, "I'd like to ask a Buddha some questions." The young man brought him into where the Buddha was sitting on a little bit of a raised platform, and the Buddha looked at him and smiled and said, "I know why you're here. You can ask me 3 questions. Think carefully." Well, the young man thought about the questions he had to ask, the questions he promised he would ask, his very own question. And not too long after that, he whispered in the ear of the Buddha 3 questions. The Buddha gave him the answers and bid the young man a safe journey home. The young man walked out of the Buddha's house, back to the abyss, and the dragon came up and said, "Did you ask my question?" "I did. You take me across the abyss, I will give you the answer." So once again, he clung on to the side of the dragon, and the dragon took him across the abyss and gently placed him on the shore. Buddha said, "If you take that pearl out of your head, you will be able to rise to heaven like your brothers and sisters." Immediately, the dragon started to rise up and flipped that pearl out of his head, and the young man caught it. "Keep the pearl," said the dragon as it rose to heaven, never to be seen again. The young man put the pearl in his pocket and headed back for home. Eventually, he came to that house where that woman was still sweeping the porch. Did you ask my question?" she said. "I did," he said. She brought him into the house and set him at the table and put teacups in front of both of them when a young woman came through the door from another part of the house and said, "Who is he?" Her mother, astounded, looked at her and said, "Why have you never spoken before?" "I didn't have much to say before. Who is he?" The mother said, "Do you like him?" She said, "I do." And when she looked at the young man, she saw that he seemed to like her daughter as well. So the two young people got to know each other, and then there was a wedding, and then the mother bid them both safe journey to his house. Off they went, and after a long time, they came to that orchard, and that man was still sitting on his porch. "Did you ask my question?" "I did," said the young man. And he brought his bride in. They sat down for tea, and he explained the Buddha had said, "If you dig to the roots of that tree, you will find a chest. And if you move that chest, the tree will be able to accept the water and the nutrients that you give it." The man said, "Will you help me dig?" Of course. So the two men dug with their shovels down until one of them hit something solid, and they cleared away the dirt and pulled up a heavy chest. When the man opened the chest, he saw it was filled with silver and gold. "Oh, thank you so much." He kept the young people for the night. They had a lovely meal. In the morning, the man insisted on giving them 2 bags, one of silver and one of gold. The two young people headed home, and pretty soon the young man could see his house, and he could see his mother sitting in front of the house. And he called out to her, "Mother, mother, I'm home." She was amazed. She stood up and started towards him, and he could see that she couldn't see. Well, he ran towards her. He held her in his arms. She said, I didn't think I would ever see you again. I am so glad you are here. Tell me about your travels." "Well," he said, "first I want you to meet my bride." And he brought the young woman forward, and his mother felt her face and welcomed her daughter-in-law to their home. He told about the other questions, and he took out of his pocket that pearl to tell her about the dragon. But when he put it in her hand, she could see again. So there was much rejoicing and much celebration, and the family lived together, and there were children and grandchildren, and all of those young people loved to hear the stories their grandfather told them. But the one they loved the most was the one about the questions.
Thank you, Sarah. It's easy to see why they love that story if he tells it as well as you did. So thank you very much. And we have one final story. Camille will also be sharing a story with us tonight.
This is a folk tale, African. It's called The Man Who Never Told a Lie. Long ago, way back before I can remember, they say, was a man who never told a lie. A man who never told a lie? We'll see about that. Well, this man's name was Kambili, which in Swahili means honest and brave. And all of the people and all of the land, from mountain to valley, ocean to sand, knew about this man Kambili, who never told a lie. Now, the king of the land, he liked to sleep. And when he did, he would snore so loud that the queen had to sleep in another room. You see, she needed her beauty sleep, and she didn't want her king looking for another queen. You know what I'm saying? So one night, while the king was sleeping on his royal bed, underneath his royal covers with one royal foot dangling out the side, the royal mouse jumped on his toes, ran up to his nose, leaned over, and whispered in his ear and said, "O king, who has ever heard of a man who was never told a lie? Perhaps this Kambili is trying to steal your throne, and you and the queen will have to move to Orinda." With that, the mouse jumped off the bed, slid across the floor, and back into his royal mouse house. The next morning, the king woke up with the sun, and he called to his servants, "Go, get me this Kambili, this man who never tell a lie. I do not believe. I have to see." So the servants ran off so quickly that the dust balls flew off the back of their feet. "Kambili, the king requires your presence." So Kambili put on his best loincloth and ran off to the king. "My lord, you ask for me?" "Yes, Kambili. Is it true that you have never told a lie?" "Well, yes, my lord." "And is it true, Kambili, that you will never, ever, 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 ever tell a lie? Cross your heart and hope to die. Stick a needle in your eye." "Well, yes, my lord." "You must be very careful, because a lie is very sneaky and gets on the tongue. And before you know it, the truth is undone. So be careful how you speak and the words that you say, 'cause telling the truth will chase the lies away. Yeah, telling the truth will chase the lies away." Well, the next day, the crowds gathered around the king. I mean, there were so many people that when you look way back, all you could see was the top of their heads. So the king called Kambili to the front of the crowd. With his right hand on his horse's mane and his left foot in the stirrup, the king said to Kambili, "Kambili, go, tell my queen that I will go hunting and I will return by noon. And you and me and she will have great feast of fuckleberry, fava bean, fig, feta cheese, and my favorite, fried chicken." Well, without looking back, Kambili ran off to the queen. And the king, he laughed and he laughed and he said, "This man who never tell a lie. We shall see about that. I am the king and the only man to be trusted in the land." Well, when Kambili got to the queen, he said, "My queen, perhaps you should prepare a feast for the king. I won't say you should, or I won't say don't. Maybe he will return by noon. Maybe he will, and maybe he won't. Tell me, Kambili, do not be wishy-washy. Will he return by noon? Will he return soon? Please tell me." "I do not know, my queen, what the king did with his feet after I left. Did he put his right foot over the horse and into the stirrup, or did he put his left foot back down to the ground?" Well, several days later, the king returned, and there was those same crowds again. A couple of monkeys, the queen, and of course, Kambili. And the king said to the queen, "My queen, this Kambili, the man who never tell a lie, told you a lie the other day. I did not go hunting, and I did not return by noon." "Oh, no, my king," said the queen. And she went on to tell the king everything that Kambili said, and she did not leave out a single word. "That is all?" "Yes, my king, that is all." Then the face of the king fell down to the ground, because he understood that the wise Kambili will never tell a lie, because he only says what he sees with his eyes. So we must all be very careful, because a lie is very sneaky and gets on the tongue. And before you know it, the truth, it's undone. So be careful how you speak and the words that you say, 'cause telling the truth will chase the lies away. Yeah, telling the truth will chase the lies away.
Camille, thank you. A beautifully told story and absolutely apt, because when we started our gathering today, I promised that I would invite all the tellers to tell us what they have for upcoming shows. And I didn't mean to lie about that, but I got so caught up in listening to the stories, I completely forgot to ask people about their upcoming shows. So I would like at this point to invite each of you who have shared your stories with us tonight to let us know if you have upcoming performances so that I won't make a liar of myself and we can have more stories to distract us from the truth.
I have one. Oh,
Okay, please.
Claire, which one of us?
Let's, I guess, Claire, and then and I should say also, thank you so much, Claire, for serving as our tech host tonight. We are very grateful to you. So Claire, and then Raymond, Renu, Bobby, Sarah, Camille, if you have anything to let us know, please do, and we can go in that order.
Okay, just want to put a plug in for the Monkey House. We have a bi-monthly, every other month show in Berkeley, and it's Sunday, and it's at 2 o'clock on University Avenue at, I think it's 1638 University Avenue. And free parking, street parking, easy, air conditioned. Please come,
What time?
2 o'clock.
Right. Thank you. And Raymond, do you have anything that you would like to add?
No events coming up. I'm on a holiday right now. But if anyone's interested in my book, Cherished Memories, which came out last July, it's 64 personal stories. 60 of them are about growing up in St. John, New Brunswick in the 1940s to the 1960s. Unfortunately, it is very expensive to mail them to the States. We found out when we started doing that. It's very expensive postage for a book. Anyway, but my email address is in the chat box if anyone wants to ask about it and the potential cost and so on. You just send me an email. I'd be happy to respond. Thank you.
Thank you. And Renu, do you have any shows to share or news to share?
Yes, I host a monthly storytelling event, and I do invite overseas tellers, just one teller. There are about 4 tellers, 3 of them Indian and 1 overseas. Vicky's Bain, Bobby's Bain. So if any of you are interested in sharing a story, it happens on the last Sunday of every month. Please let me know. I'll share my email ID here, and you're welcome to come and join us. You can listen to some stories that we are sharing, and you can share your story. I try my best to pay everyone, but sometimes there are very few registrations, so it doesn't work because in US dollars it's like peanuts. We make very little money. So I did pay Vicky, but Bobby said she doesn't want to be paid. So it depends on how many registrations I get. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. So it depends. So I will put my email ID here, and if in case any of you are interested, please write to me. Thank you.
Thank you. And Bobby, do you have any news to share?
Nope.
No. Okay. Let's see. And Sarah.
You're muted.
Thought I had done that. Yes, please. I'm the featured teller at Story Space next Tuesday, and I'll put the link in the chat. You go to storyspace.org to register, and then you'll get the information. It starts at 4 p.m. our time with an open mic for an hour, and then 5 p.m. Till 6. I'm the featured teller. They ask for an $8 donation, but you don't have to do that. If possible, you don't have to do that. You're welcome to come as you are. Thank you.
Thank you. And Camille, do you have any announcements to share?
No, I'm just getting my feet wet again with storytelling, so nothing. But if you want to invite me, that's cool. But other than that, I'm good.
Oh, glad you're back, Camille. Yay.
Okay. And I got a note in the chat that Sri may have an announcement to share as well. if I read that correctly.
Three?
Oh,
Yeah,
she
same thing like
shared.
Renu. Every full moon night, I do host a serene storytelling space. Vicky has been there. She shared a story. If anyone else is interested, it will be the full moon morning for you, which is actually night in India. So 8:30 p.m. my Indian time would be morning 7 or 7:30 for you in the morning. So if anyone is interested to share a story, I will be happy to have you. The kind of story that Sarah just shared, the Buddha story, those kind of stories, you know, are what that space looks for. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. And so thank you to everyone. And I will hand the floor over to Sally to, close our July swap.
Let me see if I'll get Sally. Give me a minute.
Okay.
All right, add a pin. And okay, go ahead.
Hello. Well, I'm here to say goodnight to you. I just want you to know that storytelling is still going on. The tale spinners are still going. And we so appreciate everybody who told and everybody who listened. Thank you for making storytelling such a joy and such a blessing. Good night, everybody.
Ali, could you add my email ID to the link list? Like, I would like to tell a story in the next swap of August.
I would be happy